Hello, welcome to HITC Sport. Right, let's take a look at every Premier League club and find one current player you wouldn't have believed would be signing for you 5 years ago. Going back to August 2015, and if somebody had identified this player would be putting on your club shirt within the next half decade, you'd be having them committed to a goddamn loony bin. Alright, let's take a look. Arsenal Nicolas Pepe. Yeah, it seems like Arsenal fans are desperately trying to convince themselves that Nicolas Pepe hasn't been a complete and utter flop. Sure, he just won the FA Cup and banged in a couple of free kicks against Frankfurt, but I'm sorry, for over £70 million, you'd expect more than 5 league goals in 31 goddamn games. Priced above Mikel Antonio scored double that, and he'd cost less than a half-eaten toothbrush. But still, if you rewound to August 2015 and tried to predict the Arsenal squad 5 years in the future, I guarantee not one person on planet Earth, not even his goddamn mother, would have predicted Pepe. Back then, he was a 20-year-old reserve team player nearly promoted to Angers, spending the season on loan at US Orleans to the third tier French football. Predicting that this piece of lower league fluff, playing every week against Dunkirk and Chambly, dribbling past part-time postmen in stadiums no bigger than an airport toilet, saying that he would one day wind up at a big club like Arsenal, it'd be about as realistic as trying to swim in the English Channel with Susan Boyle strapped to your back. Aston Villa Anwar El Ghazi. Okay, 5 years ago, Aston Villa had just been thumped 4-0 in the FA Cup final. They were run by Tim Sherwood and were about to embark on one of the worst seasons in the history of the club. This was a club driving headfirst off a goddamn cliff, so predicting their squad 5 years in the future, God, you'd have feared the worst. You probably wouldn't have predicted Anwar El Ghazi. He was the 2015 version of Hakim Ziyech, except with even more potential. Unlike the Moroccan, he hadn't yet hit his prime, was just 20 years old, and had just scored 10 goals as a teenager in his debut season for Ajax. He also scored against Barcelona at the Nou Camp. I mean, I know Shola Miowi did that too, but still, and he was also named Ajax's Talent of the Year. He was like the Dutch Jadon Sancho. He was being called up to the international squad and was apparently taking career advice from Ronaldo. Yeah, at the time he was being linked with Newcastle, but had he gone there, like Gini Wijnaldum, they would have just been a stepping stone to bigger things. Tell him that instead, his peak wouldn't consist of Champions League football every week. It would instead be relegation battles at Aston Villa. Oh, he'd probably cry himself to sleep. Brighton Davy Proper. Good Christ, lads. Brighton 5 years ago just finished 20th in the goddamn championship. Tell them then at that time that within 2 years they'd be bringing a Davy Proper from PSV for £15 million, they'd probably shoot blood out their nose. This guy was Wijnaldum's replacement out at Eindhoven. He just smacked home 7 goals from midfield for Vitesse, and at 23 he was about to embark on a 10-goal season for PSV, winning the league and playing Champions League football. He was arguably one of the hottest young midfield prospects in Europe, so predicting him for Brighton, who back then had a squad filled with lower league rubbish, it would be like now tipping Donny van de Beek to wind up in Huddersfield Town. Burnley Nick Pope. Okay, Nick Pope probably needs a minute to catch his breath and realise where he is. It seems like only 5 minutes ago he was just Burnley's third choice cup goalie, with most of the world not having a clue who he is. Now he's been capped by England, gone to a World Cup, nearly won the Golden Glove, and has now been tipped for a £50 million move to Chelsea. It's like tipping Bailey Peacock Farrell to do the same. For a guy who back in 2015 had just spent a season away from Charlton on loan at Bury, he was doing well to finally wrestle the Charlton gloves off Stephen Henderson at the Valley. So to then tip him to become a top half #1 Premier League goalie within 5 years, linked with Chelsea, it would be one hell of a call. Chelsea and N'Golo Kante. Yeah lads, rewind 5 years ago and most of you still didn't have a clue who or what N'Golo Kante was. This was a 24-year-old uncapped French midfielder who just swapped lowly Cannes in France for a supposed relegation battle with Leicester for a fee of £5 million. It wasn't exactly going to get the pulses racing. Most of you probably didn't even notice. So predicting him to be at Chelsea 5 years down the line, who at the time were the champions of England, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Mention the fact he'd have also won the league twice by then, be a World Cup champion and earning close to £300,000 a week as Chelsea's highest earner, you'd probably be ringing the police. Crystal Palace Christian Benteke. Okay, Christian Benteke isn't even in his 30s yet and is still stumbling about like an overinflated balloon. Christ above, his first touch is on par with a hungover penguin. His goal-scoring instincts seem to have packed their bags and left the country. He's clinging on to his well-paid Premier League job by the width of a nipple piercing. But go back 5 years ago, and you'd think a club like Crystal Palace would have been beneath him. He just tied up a £30 million transfer to Liverpool after battering home nearly 50 goals in 101 games to Aston Villa. The guy was only a few weeks off scoring a bicycle kick at Old Trafford. Honestly, he was being billed as Luis Suarez's true replacement for a club looking to win the league. Lads, he'd also spent the summer being linked with Chelsea and Real Madrid, so predicting that by the time he'd reached his peak, he'd be scoring 2 goals a season for Crystal Palace, it wouldn't make sense. It's like tipping an up-and-coming Dominic Calvert-Lewin to spend his peak years warming the Burnley bench. Everton Alex Iwobi. Yeah, looking through the Everton squad, not many of their current players would have been too unrealistic or shock signings. Maybe Alex Iwobi would have been a bit of a surprise, because go back 5 years ago and JJ Koch's nephew was being held up as the next big thing out of Arsenal's academy. He was about to break into the team as a 19-year-old kid. Arsenal fans were talking him up as the next Robert Pires, a homegrown baller who would restore them to title glory. They probably didn't expect that within 5 years he'd be a £30 million stain on Everton's bench. Fulham Alexander Mitrovic. That Fulham in the summer of 2015 were a complete and utter mess. They finished 17th in the championship, and so Craven Cottage was not a destination meant for Alexander Mitrovic, who at the time was held up as one of the most promising centre forwards in Europe. He just batted home 28 goals for Anderlecht and was scoring against Arsenal in the Champions League at just 20 years of age. Everybody thought his £30 million 2015 move to Newcastle was just a stepping stone towards getting him a move to Liverpool or Man United. Tell him that instead, over the next 5 years he'd be relegated twice, being promoted twice, and at the age of 25 be playing up front for a Fulham team team managed by Scott Parker, he'd probably feel like jumping off a cliff. Leeds Patrick Bamford. Oh lads, remember the utter hype train surrounding Patrick Bamford back in 2015? At just 21, the kid with the upper torso of a cheese string had just scored 19 goals for Middlesbrough, including one in an FA Cup win at the Etihad, won the Championship Player of the Year award, and was talking himself up to replace Diego Costa at Chelsea. Christ, his ambition and ego were probably targeting an outside spot at Euro 2016 with England. No, tell him that instead within 5 years he'd still be stuck in Championship promotion hunts with clubs like Leeds United. It would probably be a bit of a disappointment. Leicester, Kelechi Iheanacho. Okay, I'm sorry, but Kelechi Iheanacho was the original Gabriel Jesus. He just was. Go back to the start of the 15-16 Premier League season and an 18-year-old Iheanacho was coming off the bench to score last minute winners for Man City. The hype around this guy was ridiculous. Apparently he was Sergio Aguero's born successor. At the time, Leicester City had just scraped survival, so tipping Man City's hottest prospect to wind up there within 5 years, again, it would be like tipping Mason Greenwood or Phil Foden to soon be signing for West Ham. Liverpool, Mo Salah. Okay, I suppose not many would have predicted Andy Robertson to wind up at Liverpool, right? Because let's face it, is that club really in the business of signing relegated left backs? Well, yes actually, because they're currently trying to get Jamal Lewis out of Norwich. So instead, the most unlikely and unrealistic one was Mo Salah. Sure, the Reds were after him before Chelsea, but considering he was now chewed up and spat out of Stamford Bridge, banished back to Italy on loan, it sort of looked like he was just another Juan Cuadrado, just a winger clearly unsuited to English football. Predicting back then that within 5 years he'd actually be going strong at Liverpool, winning what he has, scoring the goals that he has, nah, nobody would have believed it. Man City, Riyad Mahrez. Again, like Nick Pope, Riyad Mahrez' rise has been meteoric. 5 years ago was the beginning of his breakout league-winning season, but let's be honest, nobody would be surprised if his good form in August 2015 was just a one-month wonder, like Timu Pukki last year. Sure, people were shoving him in their fancy league teams, but don't forget, he only scored 4 goals the previous season as the Foxes were nearly relegated. Not a man, woman or child on planet Earth could have foreseen a £60 million move to Man City, because don't forget, at the time, the Marseille president thought it was insulting to be linked with Mahrez, as Leicester players were apparently beneath his club. Yeah, they'll just sign Stephen Fletcher and Joey Barton instead. Man United, Harry Maguire. One of the most unlikely career progressions in recent history. Christ, this was like a high school janitor winning the X Factor. That's how meteoric Harry Maguire's rise has been. Go back 5 years, he was just some bang average 23-year-old defender getting relegated from the Premier League with Hull. Actually, he barely got in the team under Steve Bruce, who kept picking his son ahead of a future £80 million Man United club captain. Predicting that move for a bench-warming relegated Maguire in 2015 is like predicting Lloyd Kelly to be a Man United captain by 2025, and I promise I'll wash my eyes with vinegar while pledging an oath of allegiance to the Queen if that ever happens. Newcastle, Florian Lejeune. To be fair, there haven't been too many shocking signings in the Newcastle team. None of them have been too spectacular or unrealistic. Maybe at a reach, Florian Lejeune, because in 2015 he was a 24-year-old French defender wrapping up a switch from Girona to Man City. At the time, Newcastle were stuck in relegation battles, so tipping them to soon bring in a guy highly rated at the Etihad, yeah, probably seemed unrealistic at the time. But then again, let's not forget, someone at City clearly rated Loris Karius as well. So you can have all the money in the world, but sometimes you can still employ scouts with brains made of cheese. Sheffield United, Mohamed Bezic. God, injuries have really shoved this fella's potential down the toilet. Go back 5 years ago, and Mohamed Bezic, earmarked as the Bosnian heir to Miralem Pjanic, had just played over 30 games in Everton's midfield at 23 years of age. Sheffield United, by contrast, had just finished 5th in League One, losing a playoff semi-final to Swindon Town. To foresee that Bezic would be spending his peak on their bench when he was supposed to be the next big thing in Everton's midfield, it just wouldn't make sense. Southampton, Che Adams. Yeah, go back to the summer of 2015. Che Adams was a 19-year-old prospect at Sheffield United. He'd scored twice against Tottenham in the FA Cup and was actually being linked with half the big clubs in England. So tell him that in 5 years his seeding will be Southampton and not someone like Chelsea. Yeah, a bit disappointing and surprising all round. Tottenham, Moussa Sissoko. You know what, let's go with Moussa Sissoko, because back in 2015 this guy just slumped about the pitch for a Newcastle team who were nearly embarrassingly relegated under John Carver. His complete lack of a commitment to the club was written all over his face, slouching about the park as if he was half asleep. I'll be honest, had you told me that within 5 years not only would he still be a Premier League player, but working under Jose Mourinho for an ambitious club like Spurs, I'd have laughed in your face, because showing such a complete lack of effort and desire, I predict maybe Rennes or Saint-Étienne back in France, or someone like Rubin Kazan out in Russia, not Tottenham at 30 years of age, good lord. West Brom, Connor Townsend. I talk about Steve Bruce not giving Harry Maguire a chance at Hull. Good Christ, I'd be surprised if he even knew who or what a Connor Townsend was. This guy didn't play a single game for Hull in 15 years at the club. This isn't Man United, Chelsea or Man City, it's Hull. Not to be given even 5 minutes on the pitch is quite an achievement. And back in 2015, this guy was being passed around Dundee United, Scunthorpe and Grimsby Town on loan. It's not like he was a youth teamer either, he was 22, a year older than Andy Robertson, who was the first choice Hull City left back. You could forgive the world for assuming Townsend was destined for a career bouncing around Leagues 1 and 2, so to predict he'd be keeping Kieran Gibbs, a then Arsenal left back, out of a Premier League West Brom team within 5 years, quite an achievement to be fair. West Ham, Jack Wilshere. Listen lads, it wasn't a state secret back in 2015 that Jack Wilshere struggled with injuries, but he looked like he was finally getting back on track. That was the year he scored his second successive goal of the season and was even scoring for England, battering in 2 away Slovenia. So to predict predict that within half a decade he'd be spending the prime years of his career as a wet fudge stain in the treatment room at West Ham, it would be a surprise. Wolves Ruben Neves. Lads, I'm still surprised Ruben Neves is at Wolves. Go back 5 years ago. Neves was an 18-year-old FC Porto prodigy who'd already broken into the first team and was playing regular Champions League football, and he was about to become the club's youngest ever captain in Europe and was getting linked with a £30 million move to Liverpool every other week. Wolves, by contrast, were mid-table championship fodder under Kenny Jackett with Kevin McDonald in midfield. It's like predicting Eduardo Camavinga to wind up at Preston North End. Just no! Anyway, that's it, guys. I'm in the comments if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and as always, I'll talk to you in a while.